And welcome back to Consumer Choice Radio, broadcasting across North America and the world. It's another pleasure to bring back a good friend of the show who's been on multiple times. We're speaking with Dr. Kimberlee Josephson. She's the Associate Professor of Business, Associate Dean of the Breen Center, Lebanon Valley College, an Adjunct Research Fellow at the Consumer Choice Center, also a Writing Fellow over at the Heterodox Academy. Kimberlee, it's been a good while. Thank you for coming back on the program.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be back.
And you've been very busy, by the way. So many articles. I can't wait to get into many of them. But apart from that, I know it's the end of the school year for you, and you got a lot of grading you got to do, a lot more bureaucracy tasks. So I assume you're very, very excited for summer.
Oh, definitely. And we have a lot of fun plans going on, but yeah, how you said about bureaucracy, it's grading ends and now assessment begins, because then you have to prove that you did a good job at the course and everything. It's also allergy season. So if you see me wiping my eyes, tearing up a little bit, it's not that I'm that happy to see you, although I am. It's more just, it's that time of year. So
very good. I'll keep that in mind. Those tears are not for me. Okay, well, I'm gonna go ahead and throw a clip at you. I normally do this to David, but I'm gonna throw one at you, and you can tell me what you think.
Elon Musk tweeted outrage after Tesla lost its spot on the widely followed S&P 500 Index for ESG, which tracks the stocks of companies that it ranks highly for environment, social, and governance standards. The removal is apparently because of issues including racial discrimination and crashes linked to its autopilot cars. Musk tweeted, quote, Exxon is rated top 10 best in world for environment, social and governance by S&P 500, while Tesla didn't make the list. ESG is a scam. It has been weaponized by phony social justice warriors. Tesla has become the world's most valuable automaker by expanding into battery storage for electric and solar power systems. A representative for S&P said the list Musk may have been referring to was, quote, not a ranking of best companies by ESG score, and that it was a blog post of the biggest companies by market cap on the index once Tesla was removed. Investors concerned about issues like diversity and climate change have poured billions into funds using ESG criteria to pick stocks. Musk and others have complained that S&P Dow Jones indices and its rivals conflate too many issues by bundling ESG concerns into one total score.
Well, look at that. That's two things that you write about a lot, ESG and American entrepreneurs. So what do you think of Tesla getting that boot from these rankings?
Yeah, well, and Elon has the right to be angry about it. I'd be pissed off because really, essentially, these ratings, depending on what framework is being used and on who is doing the assessment and on what is being targeted as being higher priority over other metrics, it varies greatly. And when you think about too, reputation matters. And so I guess probably his biggest concern, because on the one hand, I would say to Elon, don't worry about it. It's fine. Just forget about it. On the other hand, I would say, this is, we have investors who are really being pressured to adhere to these new kind of rating systems and invest in companies that are supporting ESG ratings and these metrics. And so it's really, I'm not a fan of ESG in the sense of, okay, now I have to have someone assess my organization. I just said how, we're in assessment season in higher ed, right? And it's actually taking time away from me from doing more productive work to go back and look at what did I do. And instead of really looking at, so kind of like the whole idea of, skate to where the puck is going. I can't watch where things are moving and going if I'm always looking backward, right? And then also if I'm feeling bad maybe about what happened versus thinking about what's ahead. And so the same thing with ESG is that you are constantly looking back at what am I doing? And instead of thinking in regards to where I should be going, it's how do I fix this? And actually some of these metrics, sometimes become obsolete over time because things change or there's improvements, but it's really forcing companies to adhere to these standards that really should evolve and should be dynamic, but they're not because you need to have these measurements. And once again, my concern is not necessarily in companies wanting to be more environmentally friendly, wanting to be better in regards to human rights or things like that. That's all wonderful. My concern is these rating systems. I now have to pay a fee. I have to be assessed. I have to adhere to this framework. And essentially it also creates entry barriers for new entrepreneurs who maybe don't have the capital or capacity to know what they need to be doing or should be doing.
And it sounds like there's just a lot of room for people to be hired to do this stuff. So then you're having to hire more people to do more of this sort of internal surveillance. And we can see where that goes awry. I wanted to point listeners and viewers over to one of your recent articles. You're doing a very good job of taking these incredibly complex ideas that are being practiced in the halls of investing, firms and corporations, and relating it to pop culture. And you have one here at AIER.org. I will never get that 100% correct. Why ESG ratings are like Netflix's Inventing Anna. This is the show about the supposed German heiress who was kind of a fraudster. So what's your kind of main argument there, and what does it expose some of the ESG rankings as Inventing Anna?
Yeah, well, and so I watched the show and I got sucked into it and everything, and it was just so interesting to me to kind of integrate her path with the kind of developments that we see with ESG and how it came about and who's behind the scenes and how things are inflated. And so even how you had just mentioned, hiring people who can help with these rating systems, ESG is fairly new, just like when Anna came about. Early 2000s. So people are not even fully trained on these metrics and on these measures. And once again, ESG, it stands for environmental, social, and governance. Those are three really huge categories, right? So someone who maybe understands the environmental element isn't necessarily going to understand the corporate dealing C-suite matters for governance, right? Or someone who is really into social justice isn't necessarily going to understand climate concerns to the same degree. But companies are going to then hire someone to help them. And I see it in big firms that they now have positions available for people who are overseeing ESG. And to me, it's just kind of like, well, that just seems fake. It just seems like a pay-to-play program. No one is qualified to really take this on, especially just one individual, right? So, okay, we are going to have an officer who helps us with our ESG. No one is qualified for that, right? And then once again, even these metrics and frameworks that are put into place, there's a variety out there. So even how you play that clip for, Tesla on another rating system probably maybe has a higher score. There's actually a podcast that I was on called The Soul of Enterprise. And one of the hosts talked about how he tried to see what his rating would be and looking at different frameworks, on one scale he did well, on another he didn't. And it depends on even also what are you willing to disclose, right? And even this is a tricky thing. So I want to disclose enough that shows that I'm doing good things, but also I want to show that I can grow. I'll give you an example. Once again, in academia and the assessment world, we actually shouldn't be ranking ourselves too high because we want to show that we are growing as a professor in terms of our coursework or how our students are doing over time. So same things with businesses. They don't want to hurt themselves later on that they do really well this year. And then next year, if they don't do well, they're going to get knocked off the list, right? So how can they show their progression over time? So just like in that series, it seems to be like a lot of fluff and also a lot of pressure on asset managers and investors to buy into this despite limited proof that this is the right thing to do.
Yeah, we did some research when we were with our Consumer Choice Center colleagues, and it all kind of links back. There's one large company, the MSCI. They have these various rankings, and we saw that the SEC now will be requiring these sort of climate-related disclosures. You've got a lot of stuff that's coming from the EU and their ESG benchmarks, and this whole thing related to the Financial Stability Board and all these task forces. The way that we kind of saw some of the impact, at least as consumers, is that you have this entire area now where all the things that we like are going to be scrutinized. Things like energy, yeah, they're going to figure out a way to make that more expensive, even in a time of inflation. Anything related to chemicals that are pretty vital. Anything related to vaping, done. Anything related to digital, something that I like a lot, Bitcoin mining, that's done. Right. It seems as if it's just a multi-vector sort of attack vehicle that would be for basically everything. And especially in a time of inflation, seems like it's only going to lead to prices going higher.
Right. And actually something else to point out is most people are thinking like, okay, we need to have greater oversight of big business and what's going on with investments and all that sort of stuff. But who's checking on these rating systems, right? And if people are concerned, people always call out, so even for, the Tesla and Amazon, all that, right? We have these monopolies, we have these big, dominant players, right? Essentially, these rating systems are creating a monopoly in that they are the ones that are saying yes or no, you are good or bad, and kind of shining the spotlight on organizations that, and two, I always like to break it down to my students in that we want to think of business as in being made up of people, right? Almost everyone in your life has a job, works at a place, right? And is looking to better their position, right? And as we accumulate wealth, we're able to buy better things, contribute to more things, give to charity, all that sort of stuff. People in general want to do good. We shouldn't just automatically demonize these businesses because they are made up of people. And if we learn best practices and we learn ways to engage in cost savings through efficiency, through environmental matters, right? We are going to do that. The companies will pivot towards that versus locking them in or once again, really demonizing companies who sometimes don't even know. So another great example is when you talk about stakeholder capitalism and the stakeholder model is the idea that we have to think beyond our direct our core stakeholders, right? Whereas now we have to be more concerned, yes, with our suppliers and distributors and so on and so forth. But the network is complex, right? So how accountable am I in regards to my suppliers, right? Because they are their own company, they have their own autonomy. But if they are doing something wrong, that can actually impact my ESG scores, right? And so if there is some sort of connection to a supplier where I find out that there are human rights abuses, which once again, we don't want that, that is problematic. But if I'm ignorant to that, we could say, okay, well then that, you're being ignorant, you should know it. But also a company that especially has a lot of connections, they can't keep track of everything, right? I could be, going to my local grocery store and I don't know if the owner is a terrible person, right? And that type of thing, right? How much information do I need to know? And then also how much am I responsible for that information?
It sounds like it'd be the perfect time to have the Consumer Choice Center ESG ranking. Dr. Kimberlee Josephson would lead it and would be ranking all of the companies according to her own criteria. I had one question. We've seen, I believe it relates to the world of business and particularly to sort of what you're teaching in academia, is we have seen a lot of how we view corporations, companies, kind of being brought up in the culture war, specifically related to places like Florida. And, there's a lot of things to praise DeSantis for, at least from our perspective. But when we sort of see, using cultural politics to attack companies, I mean, it must be such it has to be a terrible affair to be at one of these companies, in a boardroom, figuring out what are the cultural issues at play right now, how can we, adjust ourselves. And I think it really does play into the idea that they're spending more time doing that than they otherwise would in making their products better for customers. And it doesn't necessarily make us feel, better, maybe. I don't know what your thoughts are about how sort of the culture war is changing the direction of some of these companies and if that's a good or bad thing.
Yeah, I am not a fan of it. Because I think it is taking attention away from the core operations of the firm. And also there will always be competing initiatives. So, if you decide, okay, we're going to give towards this campaign, maybe another crisis or another situation or something that needs greater assistance will arise, right? And companies are limited in terms of their resources and what they can do. And also in regards to, even personal opinions within the organization of, I think we should give to this. No, I don't support that. Something, often we see about, complaints about their virtue signaling and kind of we even talked about in a previous discussion about woke washing. Yeah, I'm not a fan of that, but I'm also more concerned with the use of company funds and shareholder money. When you hear about stakeholder capitalism and the idea of, we need to think beyond shareholder value. Well, it doesn't, it's more basic in that the shareholders, that's their money, that's their property. So that would be like, me maybe letting you borrow some money, right? You say, okay, Kimberlee, I need some money for this. I say, okay, you can borrow it, just please pay me back at this time, or I expect some return on that, so value for value type of thing. And then that's like you then coming to me and like, you know, I was going to pay you back and I was going to give you that interest, but I'd rather put it towards, you know, saving the whales or whatever it is, right? For me as a shareholder, it's uncomfortable to say, no, 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 don't put it towards that good cause. But really, you're taking my money and you're using it for what you see fit. Now, if all the shareholders are on board and want to do it, you know, that's one thing. But I think it makes so much more sense. And I actually had a tweet about it saying, you know, I want to rebrand corporate social responsibility, CSR, to really be community related and supported, really bring it all the way back down, decentralize that. Americans are very generous with their money when it comes to charity and giving back to their community when they have the money. So, you know, and right now we know with inflation and concerns about, you know, jobs and all that sort of stuff, why not just decentralize that money, that pot of money, and, you know, give it back to the shareholders, let them accumulate their wealth, give it back to the employees, let them accumulate their wealth. If there's something directly connected to where that company is operating in that local community. So this doesn't necessarily just mean, you know, small businesses, but even large companies like a Coca-Cola. If there is a factory in a certain community and there's an event happening or an issue happening there, yes, go right there, right? But we don't have to give to these big, huge, overarching social causes or campaigns where actually the money sometimes gets lost, right? Or it's not being used to where it should be used. So this creates a better, ability to track the money, and then also once again bring it back to your employees. They're your most valuable asset, right? So give it back to them, and then let them choose what they want to donate to. I actually loved, you know, Smile. That Amazon Smile, right? So I get to choose what organization I want my money to go to. So do the same thing within your firm. So just give it back to those who are putting into it, or even to your customers, drop your prices. Like that would be wonderful, right? Instead of going to these larger causes where you don't really know what's going on with your impact, or even if it might come back to haunt you later on, and that you turn out there is some sort of mismanagement of the funds.
I love that. Yeah, especially we've seen with companies like Publix. I know that they offer a lot of their employees, you know, stock in the company. And for a lot of Wall Street investors, like, oh my goodness, if we could just have those shares, that would be wonderful. We get to participate in Publix and get all in there.
Yeah.
In closing, I wanted to ask sort of a more general question, you know, also about different things that you're writing on. But you know, you're there teaching the next generation of business leaders. Wondering, you know, what are the paths that many of your students are starting to take, or perhaps you've been following some of their success. Are there a lot of people who are starting small businesses? Are they taking their business acumen into larger companies? Do you see a sort of a large diversity of where people are using their talents once they leave your program, or how is that going? And does that make you hopeful about the future, perhaps, and you know, not a kind of ESG dominated world of the future?
Yeah, I am hopeful. Actually, I was in a workshop yesterday on campus, and they were telling us a little bit about this incoming generation and some interesting statistics. And this incoming cohort is really interested actually in getting out there and ensuring their own financial security. So they are not afraid to fast track their college degree. You know, I actually enjoyed my time in college, so didn't want to fast track it. And, you know, so that's a little, it's to some extent, it's like, oh, enjoy your 4 years, you know, real life is going to hit you real hard. So, you know, take advantage of this time of transition. But a lot of them are looking to options of taking summer courses, winter term courses, getting out a year early. And I have first year students who are already asking about internship opportunities, right? And so that's really, you know, usually you don't get that until they're about juniors or seniors. So, you know, they want to hit the ground running. So I think that's awesome. So I want them to be productive. I think that's wonderful. And I think also maybe a little shot of reality might be good for these younger generations too, because then they can see, you know, how difficult it is to manage business, right? So even working at a local store, right, you can see the pressures and understand the dynamics. Some of the students from, you know, couple years back, I was a little disheartened in the classroom because they really were thinking more in terms of, I want to serve at a nonprofit. I want to feel my social purpose. I want to feel a sense of, you know, fulfillment. I need to find my passion. And I always say, like, you're not going to find your passion because it's always changing, right? I try a new food and that's my new passion, right? I get exposed to something different and now I'm interested in that. So your interests will change and therefore your passion should change. So you just need to accumulate experiences to figure out, okay, where do I want my career to go? But I felt like they were really bogged down and really, and that's a lot because of what they hear in the media, right? So it's always doomsday scenarios and climate concerns and things like that. That's not as motivating. So I'm hoping that this incoming generation is a little bit more practical in a sense of, okay, well, at the very least, what can I do to make myself most productive and happy and focus on that? And really that is something that I focus on a lot in classes, really having that accountability for yourself and really focusing on you, right, as the individual, and figure out, because everything does have a ripple effect, a spillover effect in terms of what you do. And so kind of focus on how you can be the greatest asset and perform at your best. And that'll only benefit everybody.
All right. Well, I'm not worried about academia anymore, knowing that you're there and guiding the next generation. So thank you very much for Dr. Kimberlee Josephson here on Consumer Choice Radio. Read her articles. We'll link to them. We'll also have your Twitter bio and everything that people can follow. So thanks again so much, and hope to have you again soon.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.